Alright, I prepared this little demonstration outside for you guys because up there in the studio I just didn't have enough room to move the poles around and show you it the way I wanted to show it to you without knocking over lighting and all that stuff. So we just decided to pull it outside. Now, when you're going to be drift fishing, basically there's two rigs that I only use. There's probably some other ones people over time have refined the Santee rig in different ways, but I'm going to show you just two options that we use that work really effective for us. These are the ones that were showed to us by guides, and I'm going to call it the Santee rig, but it could be the Cherokee rig, it could be whatever you want to call it. But these are the two examples that I do have that work really good for us. Now, you don't need a lot of expensive equipment. You need an assortment of hooks. I have hooks go all the way from bait hooks to circle hooks, from number 3/0 all the way up to 6/0, and it really depends on two things: what size hook you want to use. First of all, the size bait, and secondly, the size fish that you're going after. And it's the same thing with your fishing line. We've got different types of line. I'm using 25-pound test line with a 25-pound test leader. I know guys that use 60-pound test line, and these are guys that are going after 80, 90-pound class catfish. These rods and these reels and line that I have here, I've caught fish up to 40, 50, 60 pounds without any issues at all. It's all on how you control your drag on your reel. You have big fish like that, you don't want to horse them in and just wind them in as fast as you can get them to the boat. You need a different assortment of weights. We usually use anything from, I would say, probably 3/4 of an ounce up to 2 to 3 ounces, and then again, it depends if you're river fishing or it depends if you're drifting, how fast you're drifting. There's some different things there you're going to have to adjust to yourself on your own particular lake. And then you need swivels and some floats. Now that's only if you're going to use one option of the Santee rig. Alright, the first option that we use, which is the original Santee Cooper rig, all I have here for a rod is I have a 6.5 foot medium action rod, medium heavy rod, and like I said, these rods have brought in just about every size catfish you can think of. And I'm using just a basic a quantum reel on this that a lot of guys use for bass fishing. Now there again, you can use bigger reels. I wouldn't use much smaller, but this is a good reel. It holds a fair amount of line if you're using 25 or 30 pound tests, and they work really effective. They've got a good drag. Now I want to show you the first rig that we use here. I want to walk up to the camera here a little bit so I can demonstrate it to you so you can see it. I'll let some line out here. Now, what I've got is, this is your rig, okay? And then it comes on down to a leader and a float and then a hook. Let me start back here. Two different type weights you can use. You can either use a flat weight. I call this a river weight, and the reason being is because I also use barrel sinkers. I guess it's really up to you what you want to use. I'm going to tell you why I use either one. I use a flat weight like this right here if I'm fishing in a lot of current in a river, because what will happen is that weight will lay on the bottom of the river like that, and the current is not so able to pick it up and move it along. Where if you were using that barrel sinker and the current, it would, I'm calling it a barrel sinker, it's an egg sinker, it would move back, it would move in the current and roll down the river. So this would hold it in place better. Now as far as drifting, either one works good. There again, this is 2 ounce weights. I have used 3 and 4 ounce. It really depends, guys, on the amount of drift you've got. I like about a 0.4 mile an hour drift is what I like. And I can control that with my drift stock, of course, or my trolling motor. Depends then on how much wind I have. I've used a drift stock or 2 drift stocks. If I don't have any wind, then I will use the trolling motor. But I like about a 0.4 speed for my drift. So, and it's going to depend how deep you're fishing and how fast the boat's moving, what weight you want. Now, after you decide on the weight you're going to use, I always put a bead on here. And that does two different things. It helps protect that knot on that swivel. Okay, and it also makes a little noise as that thing is popping along the bottom of the lake. It'll make a clicking sound. A lot of you guys know that catfish don't have the best eyes. They rely mostly on smell and also noise. But this here might catch your catfish's attention. Might be a little bit of a plus. I come on out and come down off from my bead and my sinker, and then I go down and I tie on my barrel swivel. There again depends on the size catfish you're going after. You don't want to put a number 2 swivel on there that you'll use for brim fishing. If you're going to be fishing 50, 60 pound catfish, it might not hold. Alright, now come down the leader. Now I don't think the cameras will be able to get this leader in here. I'm going to turn like that, and maybe it can. But that there is about a 3.5 to 4 foot leader. If I'm going to be putting a float on, I like that much leader. And yes, that brings us down to the float. Why the float? If your bait's not too big, the sinker's going to be bouncing and popping across the bottom. Okay, now most of your bait is going to have some buoyancy to it. What that float does right there is it helps keep your bait up off the bottom. And it'll keep it, depending on your leader, it'll keep that bait fluctuating from the bottom to about a 3 foot level, depending on your leader. And that's a big plus if the catfish just aren't laying right on the bottom. They might be suspended a little bit, 2 or 3 feet up. That's a big help right there. And it also helps to keep you from getting hung up. Now, after I come off from there, and this also has a plug. Put the plug in on the back, so when you jerk on the rod and you set the hook, you're not pulling the plug out. I've never really lost many plugs, but no big deal. It's just a plug that goes on there. And I put it on the back, so when I'm jerking on the line, it's pulling it this way. Just, you know, something to be precaution about. Then I go to my hook. Now that's a circle hook. If you take a look at that hook, that's why they call it a circle hook. Now, that is that's a 4/0 circle hook. I've used them as small as 2/0. 4/0 is my favorite around in North Carolina and a lot of the lakes. I have used 6/0, and I have used all the way up to 12, 13, 14. It depends on the bait. If you're using a gizzard shad and you're going to cut him in half, that's a big hunk of bait. You need a big hook. And a lot of you guys know catfish has no trouble getting a 12/0 hook in his mouth. So hook size really depends on your bait and the size fish you're going after. So just want to keep that in mind. The other rig is still the Santee Cooper rig, a little bit differently refined. This basically is a kind of a giant Carolina rig, and all it has is the bait. All it has is the sinker. There again, depending on what you're going to be doing. It has a swivel. You come down to your line, can be anywhere from 1.5 feet to 3 foot. But there's no float in here, all right? And because what that's going to be is it's going to be just like you were using a Carolina rig for bass fishing. You're just kind of dragging it across the bottom. And this is going to keep that bait right close to the bottom if the fish are holding tight to the bottom. And then you put your hook on. That's just a number 4 bait hook is all it is. Now, I pointed out to you a little bit before about different type of hooks and some of the shows we've done. Something I like to do to my hook is if you see that hook right there, it comes straight out. That's just a straight bait hook, all right? Now, if you grab that hook like that, and if that's the fish's mouth, that hook, you could set that hook, and that hook could just come right out of his mouth. All right. So what I do is I'll take my hooks and my pliers and I'll put just a little bend like that on my hook. Same thing with my circle hooks. If you look at my circle hooks, generally they have a bend to them, but some don't. I hope I'm holding that right. You can see that it has a little bend right there. Okay, so I'll bend that hook just a little bit, and what that does when the catfish grabs it, you can't pull that hook out without hooking onto your fingers. Try that test yourself. Don't bite, don't grab onto it hard, but just grab onto it and then just slide that hook out. I can't pull that hook out without it grabbing onto my finger. So that'll help you a little bit too. A lot of times, you know, you'll set that hook and you'll miss a fish, and a lot of times you could be just pulling it right out of its mouth. All right, let's go back up to the studio and we'll watch some more footage of some nice fish that we've caught down the Santee. I wanted to show you that demonstration a little bit out here, and just to help you understand a little bit about what we're doing and what I do when I go catfishing. I have 100 other ways that I catfish, and I'm sure you do too. These are just 2 examples of techniques I use if I'm going to go like the Santee Cooper Lakes or some of these big lakes and target big fish. We'll talk about bait and things like that later on in another show. So let's go back up to the studio.